And now here, Magnus Carlsen, knight to c3, jumping in with the knight. In today's video, Magnus Carlsen shocks Ding Liren with an explosive knight sacrifice in the 2020 Carlsen Tour Finals. Now in the game, Ding Liren, the world champion, he opens one knight to f3, and here Magnus on move 1, he expands on the queenside with the move c5, a very interesting choice. Now here, of course, Ding Liren, if he wanted to, he could transpose back to a 1e4 opening with the move 2e4, likely heading for an open Sicilian. Now, Ding Liren is mostly a 1d4 and 1c4 player. However, in this game, he actually does just that. He goes 2e4, transposing back to a Sicilian defense, and he's likely heading for an open Sicilian with the move d4 on the very next move. Now, Magnus Carlsen, which variation of the Sicilian defense is he going to go for? He is mostly a Sveshnikov expert. He loves that move knight to c6. However, in this game, he does mix things up, and he goes for the move d6. Now from here, Ding Liren expands in the center, d4 on the board, Magnus takes the pawn, c takes d4, then knight takes d4, and now here Magnus, knight to f6, attacking the pawn on the e4 square, Ding Liren defends it, knight to c3, and again here Magnus has several different options he could choose from. For example, there is the dragon with g6, there is the classical Sicilian with move knight to c6, however instead, Magnus does go for the ultra-sharp Najdorf variation with the move a6. And this is my personal favorite variation of the Sicilian defense. It's what I play as black against 1e4 almost exclusively. However, Magnus Carlsen, he is not as big of a fan of this move. He thinks the Najdorf is just too risky and too sharp for his taste. However, he must have a specific idea in mind for this game. Now here, Ding Liren, despite being a 1d4 player primarily, he does know how to play 1e4 openings. And here he does go for the sharpest line against the Najdorf, that being the English attack with the move bishop to e3. Now, the idea behind this move is very simple. Ding Liren wants to go f3, then queen d2, long castles, and then launch an attack on the kingside with moves g4 and g5. Now, this line is incredibly dangerous, and black has to know what he's doing. Now, here black, Magnus, he has two different options. There are two main lines. One is e5, expanding in the center right away, and blocking that pawn on e4. The other one, and the one he played in the game, the older move, is the Scheveningen style move, e6. Now here we have a Scheveningen pawn structure in the middle of the board with those pawns on d6 and e6. And this line is thought to be a little bit riskier than the other idea of e5, as now Ding Liren has a somewhat easier time getting his attack going on the king side. Alright, let's see what Ding Liren can pull off in this game. From here he goes f3, the standard idea. If you go queen d2 before f3, then knight g4, hitting the bishop on e3 is super annoying. So f3 on the board for Ding. And then Magnus here, he expands on the queen side with the move b5, a very strong idea. Now real fast, in this e6 line of the English attack, it is imperative that black gets counterplay going on the queen side as quickly as possible with that move b5. Instead, if you go say bishop b7 and short castles, then the basic setup of queen d2 and long castles followed by g4 is just incredibly strong. So with that in mind, b5 is necessary immediately, and Magnus does know this. Alright, now Ding Liren, the main ideas are queen d2 and g4, but instead of those right away, he does play a prophylactic move, a3, expanding on the queen side. Ding Liren just guarding that b4 square with the pawn, trying to stop b4 ideas from Magnus Carlsen. Now here Magnus, bishop b7 on the board, the main line. Again, the idea being you want to go bishop b7, then knight d7, and then rook c8, developing the queen side before even thinking about castling on the king side. Now here Ding, he expands on the king side, g4, a very aggressive move. Of course, now the threat is g5, so you definitely don't want to go, say, knight d7, then g5 is a nasty idea. So instead, h6 on the board for Magnus. The idea being is trying to clamp down on that g5 square with the h-pawn. Now here, Ding Liren, queen d2 on the board, the standard idea. Magnus goes knight d7, also very standard. And now here, Ding Liren, he plays the main move, long castles on the queen side. Again, there were other ideas. For example, rook g1 and h4 immediately were also playable, but long castles is the main move. And here Magnus does the same, rook to c8, following the main line of this variation. And now here, this is the first real branching point of this variation. Both sides have reached the main line of the Scheveningen English attack. Alright, Ding Liren, what is he going to do here? There are a few different ideas. Again, rook g1 and h4 immediately are both very playable. However, Ding Liren, he plays another prophylactic move, king b1, getting his king off that semi-open c-file and try to get his king a little bit safer. However, this move is a little bit slow, And here Magnus Carlsen, he finds the best response immediately. He goes d5, expanding in the center, and now Ding Liren has to worry about ideas like d takes e4. That would just obliterate his pawn structure. And now, very importantly, normally in these sorts of structures, white will have the resource e5 available. However, in this position, that knight does control e5, meaning e5 expanding in the center is not a possibility. And of course, you can't allow d takes e4. That would just destroy your pawn structure. So with that in mind, here Ding Liren is virtually forced to capture on d5. So e takes d5 on the board, then Magnus takes back with the knight takes d5. Obviously, bishop takes d5, not the right idea. Then you just lose that light square bishop for nothing after knight takes d5, and Ding would have the bishop pair. So, knight takes d5 on the board. Then here, Ding Liren, he cannot allow knight takes c3, try to ruin his pawn structure on the queen side. So with that in mind, knight takes, and then bishop takes d5 on the board. Now here, after that forced sequence of moves, we have a completely different pawn structure on the board. Now the d file is technically an open file, and the e file is a semi-open file as well. Alright, now the battle plans are still the same. Magnus will attack on the queen side, and Ding Liren will attack on the king side. Now here in this position, Ding Liren has several different moves he could choose from. For example, bishop e2 and h4 are very good. Instead, rook g1 on the board. Now this is a very strong idea. Of course, you are supporting the future g5 break. However, the one weakness of this move is it does relinquish control of the h4 square. So now, if Ding Liren goes h4 in the future, that would drop a pawn to the move queen takes h4 of Magnus. So with that in mind, here Ding Liren, after rook to g1, he is planning f4 and then either f5 or g5. That will be his main attacking idea on the king side. Now Magnus, it is his turn to move. In the game, he goes bishop c5, getting the dark squared bishop out into the game, a solid idea. Of course, there were stronger options. The computer loved the idea of knight to e5 in that position, but instead, bishop c5 on the board, and now Ding Liren, he just continues his idea. f4 on the board, now the threats include f5 and g5. So Magnus, how is he going to respond? In the game, he finds the strongest move immediately, and it is definitely not short castles. Instead, in this position, Magnus Carlsen finds a much stronger idea. When Ding Liren went f4, he weakened the square e4, and for that reason here, Magnus, he jumps in with the knight to the f6 square, eyeing that newly weakened e4 square, and now he is technically threatening knight to e4, and depending on what Ding does, that may be a very, very strong move here. So, for example, if Ding just goes g5, then knight to e4 jumps in, hits the queen, hits the g5 square, and that knight will be an absolute monster. Beyond that, if Ding Liren goes f5 here, then e5 will be a very strong move, potentially followed by knight to e4 again. So Ding Liren, what is he going to do? In the game, he goes bishop d3, a very interesting choice. Now that bishop does control e4, that way if the knight jumps into the e4 square, bishop takes e4 will be a possibility for Ding. So good multi-purpose move, developing the last piece into the game and guarding e4. Now here Magnus, his best move, believe it or not, is still knight e4. Of course, if Ding takes on e4 with the bishop, he is giving up his light squared bishop, and Magnus would have the bishop pair in this position. So that would be a very strong move regardless. But instead here, Magnus, he stays flexible. He goes queen to c7. And while this move is a little bit slower than the immediate knight to e4, this move does put pressure on the c-file, and we can see if this bishop and queen ever get off the d-file here, then queen takes c2 could be a deadly threat in the future. Now here, Ding Liren, once again, knight to e4 is coming, and how is Ding going to respond? In the game, he finds a very creative idea, queen to e1, retreating the queen back to the first rank. And this is a move that would make Magnus Carlsen blush. He just loves these weird retreating queen moves. Now the idea, obviously, you're getting out of the way of a future knight to e4 idea that would not hit the queen on the d2 square. And beyond that, the queen now eyes the king on the e8 square, and that means ideas like f5 or knight to f5 could be that much stronger. Now here, Magnus, he jumps in with the knight to e4, the strongest move by far. The main idea capitalizing on the weakness of the move f4, which weakens the e4 square. Now here, Ding Liren, what should he be doing? This is a critical position in this game. If he doesn't find the right way forward, he could get blown off the board in short order. Now, according to the engine, the strongest idea here for Ding is going to be knight to b3. You retreat the knight and put pressure on that bishop on c5 and offer the dark squared bishop trade, and that would be to Ding's benefit. Instead of that here, Ding Liren proceeds with the move h4. Now, this move is playable as the queen on c7 doesn't control h4, And beyond that, even if it was on d8, the queen on e1 does control that square. Now here, Ding, his idea again is going to be g5, expanding on the king side, trying to open up lines of attack against the black king. However, Magnus, he's ready for it, and here in this position, he ignores the threat of g5, and he just goes queen to b7. Now the queen does exert pressure on this diagonal, but more importantly, it also sets up various b4 ideas, and the queen is eyeing the white king on the b1 square. All right, here, Ding, again, in this position, the main idea is going to be knight to b3. You have to get the knight over to the b3 square, putting pressure on that bishop on c5. However, again, Ding Liren does not find that resource. Instead, he goes c3, expanding on the queen side. And if you know anything about chess, in opposite sides castling positions, it is always very, very dangerous to push those pawns in front of your own king. Now, Ding Liren, his idea was perhaps trying to go, say, knight to c2, perhaps trying to bolster that knight on d4. It makes some sense. However, for tactical reasons, it just doesn't work in this position. So, in this position, Magnus Carlsen does have a beautiful tactical blow. And if you like puzzles, go ahead and pause the video right now and try to find the killer idea that Magnus found in this game, in this position. And while you're at it, go ahead and smash that YouTube like button for me. Thank you so much for doing that. It helps me out so much. All right, Magnus here. The idea is going to be bishop takes a3, giving up the bishop on the a3 square. Now, the idea, it's not really a bishop sacrifice. If you take it, if you go b takes a3, then the move is knight takes c3, forking the king and the rook. You will get the rook and 2 pawns for the 2 minor pieces, and that is a relatively good trade for Magnus. So here, b takes a3, that is not a good idea at all. Instead, Ding Liren, in this game, he just continues on the king side with his attack. He goes f5 on the board. You know, a very good practical idea. The idea being, again, he wants to get his king side play going as fast as he can, but Magnus Carlsen, he is not distracted by this move f5 from Ding. He does not see ghosts, and he just goes for it on the queen side with the move b4. An incredibly strong move, and it does make a very funny impression. Here he is entombing that bishop on a3. It cannot go anywhere, but of course, again, b takes a3 would be met by knight takes c3, and Magnus would have more than enough material for that sacrificed bishop. All right, here, Ding Liren, he finds the move c4, expanding on the queen side, trying to keep the queen side closed. However, Magnus Carlsen, again, in this position, he finds a beautiful tactical shot. And again, if you like puzzles, pause the video right now and try to find the tactical shot played by Magnus Carlsen in this position. All right, the beautiful idea for Magnus in this position. If you saw the intro, you know what's coming. Of course, it's going to be knight to c3, the brilliant idea. And just take a moment to appreciate the beauty of this position. Here, the bishop and the knight are both hanging to that pawn on the b3 square, but it turns out this is a brilliant move by Magnus. All right, now real fast, the idea being, again, if you take on a3 or on c3, then you recapture with the pawn, you're opening up the line of attack with the queen on the king, and that would be absolutely devastating, so you can't do that. Instead, king to a1 on the board for Ding. Both of those pieces cannot be taken, and they're both still hanging. And again, Magnus, he does not move either of those pieces. Here, he just goes bishop takes c4, winning that c4 pawn. And now again, the idea being if you take on a3 or c3, that opens up the queen side to Ding Liren's peril. So instead of that, here, what should Ding Liren be doing? Well, it's pretty difficult to find a good idea for Ding here, to be honest. If you go bishop takes c4, that just activates the rook on the c-file, and it's not clear how you can survive. So with that in mind, Ding finds the best practical idea, f takes e6, trying to open up the king side immediately. However, Magnus Carlsen, he's ready for this idea, and here finally on move 24, he castles his king on the king side, short castles on the board, and now this last piece, that rook on the h8 square, now the f8 square, is entering the game. All right, here, Ding Liren, he takes on c4, bishop takes c4 on the board, Magnus takes back with the rook, rook takes c4, and now rook d2 for Ding Liren. The idea being he wants to try and guard along the second rank, and overall this is a very good defensive resource. However, here, Magnus Carlsen, he is not done sacrificing pieces. In this position, he sacrifices the bishop on the b2 square. Bishop takes b2 is the move. And now Ding Liren, he has no more pawns on the queen side covering his king. They are all gone. Alright, king takes b2 is the move for Ding Liren, but now Magnus expands on the queenside yet again, this time with the move b3. A very strong idea. Now that pawn is supported by the queen on b7, and if you go knight takes b3, then you're going to run into an immediate idea like rook to b4 or rook b8, pinning the knight on b3 to the king on b2. The knight will be lost. That will be an absolute disaster. So instead here, Ding Liren, he takes on f7. He takes f7 on the board, and Magnus recaptures with the queen. Queen takes f7, an interesting recapture. Now here in this position, Ding Liren, he has defended very, very well so far, and he's not out of the game yet. For example, there are resources like rook to f2, that rook being supported by the bishop, and the queen would have to move, and the game would go on. But instead here on move 29, Ding Liren, he does take that pawn on the b3 square, but that runs into the immediate idea of rook to b4, and now look at this. There is no good way to defend the knight on b3. For example, queen to d1 would be a good move if the knight didn't control the d1 square, and even if it didn't, Magnus Carlsen will be following up rook f to b8 in the future. That means that knight on b3 will be lost, and Magnus Carlsen will have an overwhelming material advantage, and for that reason here in this position, Ding Liren resigns on the spot to Magnus Carlsen and his insane sacrificial idea in this Najdorf Sicilian. Wow, what a game. Alright, Chess YouTube, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, smash that like button. And while you're at it, check out this video right here, where I cover 5 of Magnus Carlsen's best games ever in the English attack against the Najdorf Sicilian. If you enjoyed this game with the English attack, make sure to check out that video. It's got 5 of his best games. It's a complete Magnus-style opening repertoire in the English attack. I'm sure you're going to love it. And I'll see you in the next video.